Hi, I'm Ashy, and today I'm finishing off this year-long series that I did of birth month animals in watercolor. So this is December, the final month of my birth month animal series, and it is the rat. So when I got to this one, I don't know that I was super thrilled. And if you're born in December, I understand if you weren't super thrilled when you saw the rat. But I think these turned out wonderful. They turned out so beautiful and so cute. And so I was really happy with the result of this. And I did three different styles. I did like a traditional rat, and then a more whimsical one surrounded by flowers, and a cute baby version. So check out these tutorials. Of note, the tutorials are not real time. They are time lapsed. So I sped them up because each one takes a little bit around an hour, a little bit under, a little bit over an hour. And that would just be too long of a video to put out there. So I did speed up each of these versions, but I didn't cut out any of the content. So you see the painting from start to finish, all of the techniques. I also kept in the real-time instructions that I provided so that you understood my thought process and the techniques that I'm using. And I just sped up the video kind of around them, so that you have all of that information to have a go at it yourself. So I really hope that you give one or all of these a shot. If you don't feel like trying all of them, they are available for purchase as prints at my website, shop.craftywithashy.com. So if you're interested in purchasing, you can check that out. I really hope, though, that you give one or all of these a try yourself. And they're just the perfect option for somebody who either loves rats or was born in December. I think it's just such a fun way to personalize a card. So let's dive into the tutorials. December is rat. So I'm going to do my best to make this rat look cute and not gross, because rats can be gross, but they also can be really cute, and that's why some people like them as pets. So I'm going to start with the bottom of the rat and just kind of draw a little leg here, like a haunch, and then come up to where the arm will be, and then make a little like sine wave. U, upside down U here, and that'll be down to it, the other leg here. Here's the other side, an arm coming down this way, and then the other arm going to kind of be in front here. There's like indication from where the hand will be. Arms coming up there. There we go. And then it kind of slopes up just a little bit. So I'm just very loosely getting it in, making sure that I'm getting it big enough on the page so that it really fits well. And then from this shoulder, that's where the head's going to come off. Kind of get that shape in there. Come around the top of the head and maybe point it up just a little bit, so that's going to angle up. I'm going to get ear in here, so it's going to be coming down into the head a little bit, not just off the back of the neck, and curved around there. And then the other ear, you're just going to see kind of the side of it curve, maybe like that. Okay, the eye, then bottom lid a little bit, kind of obscuring a little bit of the eye there. Then rounded here, comes back to a little point, and then the nose kind of curves down to a point, across, make it a little bit bigger, a little lower. Okay, and then the tail kind of roll around the back. That's crazy wide. Whoops, not that wide. A little bit wider at the base, and the narrows as it goes out a little bit to decide exactly how I want it to look. It'll kind of go off into the distance there, and then I'll do a little bit of a soft edge there to blend it out a little bit. And then I need to give it little feet. These a little bit pigeon-toed here. Okay, and then hands will have the little separation, the fingers, and the little ridge here for the back of the hand, the other one. So a little ridge for the hand, and then there'll be some little hair coming over this here. All right, now let's kind of firm up some of these lines. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm gonna just lighten it up, and then we'll get to painting it. So my rat is going to be a white, like kind of the typical lab rat or pet rats that are the pure white with the pink like ears and hands. So it's going to have a little bit of a pink undertone, but I don't want it to be super pink. So I'm going to add
a bit of green with it to make it a little bit more brown. And that's going to be the wash that I use over the rat so that it's different color from the background, right? And because it is going to be such a light color, I need to make sure that my drawing is super light. Now I'm going to take that light wash and paint it over the entire rat. Take a little bit of clean water and put it on the side where I want some soft edges to be. Just a tiny bit more of that color and leading it to the tail. And I'll add some more pink to that later, but that'll just get that base for the soft edge there. Okay, now I need to take some darker mix, and I want it to be just a little bit more pink here. Not that pink, okay? It's kind of like a muted mauve color. And I'm gonna add that in for some shadows. So tap that in between the legs, under the arms. I'm gonna drag and then pull away and lift so that the little explosion happens away from the arm. A little bit under the neck there, a little bit behind the jaw, and then just kind of touching the side here to get a little bit of roundness to the rat. Okay, and just a tiny bit of that into the face as well. Lift a little bit of a highlight on this side. So I'm just taking a damp brush, I'm dabbing it on my towel here and just lifting out. Okay, add just a more darkness to the other side of this leg here, between under the hands. Okay, now I'm gonna let that dry and then work on the next layer. I'm gonna take a smaller brush. I was working with a 16 round. This is an 8 round. And I'm gonna make this a little bit more of a cool color, so it's more gray. I added some Payne's Gray into it. And I'm gonna use that to add some more shadows. And I'm using this opportunity as I'm kind of blending those shadows out a little bit. I'm dry brushing away from them to get a little bit of texture. And I'm also negative painting around the arms to get the separation between the body and the arms. Nice light wash of pink over the hands. More gray to separate the hand from the arm a little bit, and just add in some small like shadows for where their ears, of the mouth in here, just with some pink, and then I'll go in and darken it here with shadow. Just a little bit of a shadow on this cheek, get some pink into the ears, add some pink tail here, add some darkness in. Okay, I'm gonna add in the pink nose, lift out just a little bit of a highlight on the top. Use just a little bit of gray to find the bottom edge of our jaw a little bit. Add just a little texture in, using gray to add in these darker shadow textures. Muted pink, so pink with some green in it for feet so that they in shadow. Now I'm going to add some separation between the fingers and the toes. So I'm using a brown, grayish pink. So it's kind of like a purpley pink color. I just mixed Payne's Gray or Sienna Sepia, which is all in this well, with my pinks that are here to get this color. And then I'm just gonna add little lines, very, very light pressure on the paws and say the feet, the toes. And then I'm gonna add a little bit of a shadow on the finger part and one side of the hand. Now take some water and add that to the ground, and then we're just going to take some of our grays and add a little bit of a shadow. Brown, a little bit of splatter. Okay, now for the eye, I'm going to get a little bit of my pink color and outline the eye with that first. Now I'm going to let that dry and then do the dark part and add just a little bit more shading to this side of the nose. Now for the dark part of the eye, Payne's Gray and Sepia mixed, and I'm gonna get a curve on this side first because that's where it's the darkest. It's not getting any light there. I'm gonna make sure to leave a highlight in the eye. There we go. Okay, a little bit of that dark color into the nose or nostrils. Lift up some of it because it's a little dark. He's a little too pink. I'm gonna add some slight orangey yellow to tone down the pink. So I'm going to kind of glaze this color over. I got to make sure it's dry before I do glazing. And I'm actually going to take a bigger brush and I'm going to glaze over the background a little bit too, to give it a warm, like, sun-kissed. So I'm going to just take this color, it's nice and pale, and wash it over. Take a little bit of clean water around the edges, blend that out, and add just a little bit more warmth right around. Splatter a little bit of yellows also. Okay, a little bit into the feet too. Okay, I'm going to take some of my grays and do some dry brushing on the ground to get some texture, get more darkness in between the feet, and then right under this side. Okay, and I'm going to take just some more warm gray here and define the edge of this hand a little bit more. Then I'm going to blend that shadow up into the shadow that's around the jaw. Okay, I already signed it, but one last step, I'm going to add some whiskers with some white pastel pencil. Just nice, quick goes with that pencil. Some sticking out the other way, a little bit of white highlight along some of the edges as well. And then I think I'm just going to take a very light gray and add a few little dots up along the whiskers, be where the little hair follicles are coming out. Those up a little bit so that they're not too dark. And there is rat number 1. For the second rat, I'm going to do it in some flowers. So the flowers are going to be like large and oversized, right? Because it's a rat's perspective. But I'm going to start by drawing out the rat to make sure it fits on the page. So I'm going to get in the backside first. And it's just going to kind of be a line up. It doesn't have to be straight. And then a curve for the kind of transition to back. And then it's going to go down just slightly. And then I'm going to put in an ear there. And then kind of following this line back up, put in the head. And there's the second ear, which you're not going to see all on that side. And then this is basically just going to keep pointing up because I want him her looking up at a flower here. And the neck comes down into the chest, which points downward. A foot here, which I'm just going to kind of put a little rectangle, and then it comes back. And then the second leg comes down here, and then again, just kind of a little trapezoid for the foot. And the belly goes here, back to the back leg. Same thing, there's foot. Okay, I'm going to make it skinnier, so I'm going to drop the back just a little bit. That'll also exaggerate looking up a little bit. Tail is going to go curve off the page. Saturate that curve just a little bit more flatter here. Back this way. So then for the facial features, we're going to have part of the nose. So it's just like a little triangle. And then we'll come down from the nose to the mouth, chin, and then there'll be some little like freckles there where the whiskers will come out, which I am indicating, but I'm going to end up erasing them. But that gives me an idea how far I want that to come and then where I want the eye to be. So the eye, I want to kind of be between where the nose is and the ear is. I don't want it to come all the way out to the ear. So almost though, I put in 2 little points. That's kind of where it's going to be. I'm going to add a circle for the eye. And then from that circle, it's going to come down to a point on both sides. So I'm going to alter the shape of the head just a little bit here. So I'm bringing it up a little higher and angling it toward the nose a little bit more. Give it a subtle little curve up. This foot's coming down a little bit too far, so shorten that up. Okay, something like that. The foot, it's going to be hiding in foliage, so I'm not really worried about getting it too precise. Get forward more. Little toes. Now I'm going to get in this ear a little bit better. Nice round ear. The dark areas. I'm going to get some of the flowers drawn. So December has 2 birth month flowers. Holly is the first one, but I don't want to do holly because it's just too Christmassy for me. So the other one is Narcissus, which is like the daffodil family. So they have the little trumpet centers. So I'm going to get one of those drawn in here where the mouse will be sticking its nose toward the center of that flower. Just 2 angled lines, a curve, and then follow the same curve here, and then finish off this oval behind the nose. So I'm not closing it. And then they're 6-petal flowers. So I'm going to start by getting 1 petal in the top of the flower. So kind of a curve to a point and then a curve back down. And then I'm going to skip space and do another one down toward the bottom. And then there'll be another one back here, which you're not really going to see, right? For the third one, it's going to be hiding behind. And then I'm going to fill in the gaps like so. And then just give the indication of one here and maybe same thing. Here we go. And then it'll kind of be a curved stem coming out of the back here. Curve this flower, this petal, so that it looks like it's pointing more this way. Add a curve here. And then again, kind of curving the stem down this way and coming in. And they have pretty beefy stems. And then they have multiple flowers coming off of one stalk. They can. So like your daffodil has one, but other narcissus, something like that, can have multiple. So I'm going to do another one where you're seeing the back view. So the stem widens out to hold the flower. And then you're going to have your petals coming out from that. I'll have some washed out blurry ones in the background, and then maybe another cluster that we're going to see putting up over the rat. And this one I'm going to do like a front view. So we're going to circle for the little trumpet, and then from that trumpet do my 3 petals, and then in between fill it in. Have a side view here. So kind of get in that trumpet, get in the back of the flower, it widens out, and then that'll give me an indication where those petals are going to come from. And these are going to be very side view petals. So we're going to have very short petals compared to the front view, and we're not going to see as much. Okay, so that little trumpet's coming out the side. And then maybe one coming through the top, and that'll be just like a bud that hasn't fully opened yet. Okay, something like that. And then we'll have leaves, which I'm not going to necessarily draw in because they work better just naturally using the brush to make the shapes versus like drawing them in. So there's my 2 main like stalks, and then I'll have some blurry ones. But I'm going to go ahead and lighten up that sketch now and then start with painting. Now the flowers are yellow and oranges, but pretty pale. So I need the sketch to be really light on the flowers. And then the rat is white, so it's gonna have like undertones of pinks, and the shadows will be kind of purpley, gray, browns. But everything's really light. So I need to make sure my sketch is really light so that the pencil doesn't show through. So for painting, I'm gonna start with a really light wash of a muted pink. So this well has my kind of pink mixtures that I've used. So there's some reds in it, but mostly it's permanent rose, and then just a little bit of green. And this is again a mixture of my greens, but I would say mostly olive green, and that'll make a kind of grayish muted color. And I want it really light, and I'm gonna put a wash of that over my rat. And I am just going around the eye to preserve for a highlight and highlighter. Okay, I'm gonna rinse and then drag out the bottom so it's not got any hard edges on the bottom. And then I'm gonna take a little bit more green and tap that in to shadow areas. So right on the bottom, between the chest is, a little bit kind of under the jaw, the back ears. Okay, and then I'm gonna let that dry and do the next layer. Just a little bit more color to some of the shadowy areas. So this is a more pink bias brown, just touching that in and then dragging it out away from that area to get a subtle texture and say across the back. And so basically dry brushing to get a little bit of texture. Green in here, and then same here, just a little green, and that makes it a little more brown, and just a touch of gray. And so this is my gray mixtures in as well, which has Payne's Gray, Sepia, and Burnt Umber usually in it. Drag that out, just a little bit gray on this darkest area on leg. And then for the darker part under, using that very pink lean brown, just a little bit of water it out, and then add in some color right at the base of, tap it out a little bit. I'm just negative painting around that ear shape there to set it off. Okay, now to get the tail in, I'm gonna use my light wash of pink, just sweep it in there, and then a little bit of shadow dropped into some areas. The green. Add in some water along the end. Okay, now I'm gonna add just a bunch of water to the background and get some of my faded out narcissus. I don't know if I'm saying that right. We're gonna call them daffodils because I know how to say that. Okay, some nice bright yellows. Just kind of tap some of those in the background and a little bit in the foreground also, just to add a little bit of interest in the foreground. It just adds some texture. Okay, lots of yellow because the green can go over the yellow anyway, so I'm not worried about that. And then I'm gonna start getting in these stronger daffodil colors. Also tapping that color in and just getting soft leads, soft blends out. And since it's thicker paint, it's not gonna dab quite as far as the splatters, so more in place. Just kind of indicating one down here that I'm gonna leave very out of focus. Okay, and then I'm gonna add some greens. So I'm gonna use olive green with just a little bit of sap green to kind of cool it down a little bit, get a little bit brighter in the color, and then we'll splatter some of that into the background. Do some pressure strokes, so light pressure to heavy pressure and then up to get some leaf shapes in. And the more water that's on my brush, the less it's gonna get out. So if I don't need out as much, I can just add or paint. Just add a little bit of greens down to the bottom. It's kind of washy and some there. A little bit of green just around the head. Lifting up just a little bit so that I make sure that I'm keeping my rat nice and defined on that top edge. The tail, I don't really care if it's defined, and the bottom edge, I don't care as much, but I want the top to stay defined. Okay, I'm gonna add just a little bit more of my yellows here to where they're starting to wash out more because I added all that green around it. I want them to be there. I just don't want them to be perfect shape, but still there. I'm gonna let that dry and then work on the next layer of flowers. With a smaller brush, so that one was a size 16 round, this is size 8 round. I'm gonna go in and just edit the shape of the mouse just a little bit. Just trying to blend out a little bit. Some of this bottom part soft edges just by scrubbing. I think I wanna stick with the big brush for the daffodils. So I'm just getting a little bit more of my yellow here and gonna get in these petal shapes a little better. And I'm really just kind of being sketchy with it, not being real precise. Add just a little bit of a orangey mix to the front here. I don't know if I like that, so I'm just gonna lift that back up. Add maybe just the indication of an orange little trumpet here. Yeah, that's better. Okay, now these I'm gonna get in orange also. Little orange trumpet shape with some yellow on the inside. And then greens and the back of this flower, this stem down, and so here, and then some leaves. So I'm just starting light and heavy, lifting up slow, and kind of running right off the page for some of these. The darkness into it, widen up parts of it. And just a little bit more linear details into the background, but very faded. So pretty much just water the brush here. Okay. And then maybe just some hints of some flowers off of those in the background. Very, very pale and watery, and just little dabs of my brush, not even thinking about petal shapes, just literally dabbing just a little bit of yellow off of these little buds that I created here in the front. And for this flower, just a little bit more detail into the petals. So just adding some darkness, just like sketchy lines, almost outlining it, and just some texture in the middle. So I have nearly a dry brush, and then I'm just adding a little bit of texture. Now I'm gonna come back to the rat and do the face. So I'm going to take my size 8 round brush and start by getting in some pink around the eyes, and then the pink for the nose. Just a little bit more pink into the ears. Slightly more shadow into some of these areas, just to give it a little bit more depth and contrast. Now I'm going to get the eye in, so I'm going to use a dark mix of sepia and Payne's Gray, so it's a little bit warmer than just the bluish Payne's Gray. I'm going to tap that in, get in the circle for the eye, and then leave a highlight. So I'm just going to kind of tap that around so that there's white space kept in the eye for a highlight. And then I'm going to tap a tiny bit of that for the little nostril. Okay, I'm going to take just a little bit of a brown pink mixture here and tap that in just the very tip of my brush for some little whisker spots, and then just a tiny bit of gray for the mouth. I want just a little bit more pink around the eyes, especially along the top, and give it a top lid. Just a little bit of texture into the head there. Get a little bit more pink on the tail. I think that's pretty good. I want to add a few more leaves, and I'm going to use this smaller brush to do that. Add in a little bit of sap green to some of them to get a little bit more variety, and then maybe just some like grasses up in between some of these areas. I'm literally just flicking my brush with that sap green just to get a little bit more texture in there. Dry off my brush, and then just drag some of that around from where it's still wet to get a little bit more of those linear marks. Very, very light wash here. Same thing in the background, just kind of flicking up. Okay, a little bit more splatter, larger brush to get bigger splatters. Okay, I'll let that dry, and then step back from it, make sure I like it. I think that's pretty good. I just want to add a little bit of definition into the center of this daffodil here. So a little bit more orange, and then just maybe a slight shadow coming down from that onto these petals. All right, and there is the whimsical rat.
Right, look.
For the baby rat, I'm gonna start by putting in like a little rock thing that the baby rat's gonna be standing on. Just kind of like a jagged shape here. And then an ear, make it nice and big, really exaggerate the ears. The head goes across, and then the second ear. That side of the face is gonna come down to a little cheek. This side of the face is gonna come down from the ear and then angle over to the chin. I'm gonna get in the heart-shaped nose. The mouth is gonna down, and then this side's gonna come out to where that cheek is. This side's gonna come down and then come back a little bit. Smile. And the bottom jaw you can see on this side. From this side of the nose, we're gonna come up and come over the eye. Eye is gonna have a little curve down the bottom on both sides and be of an oval shape. We have the iris, and then we'll have just kind of some subtle indications of some shadow here where the nose, the muzzle part, comes forward. I don't know if rats have muzzles, but that's what I'm going to call it. For the body, it's going to come down from like this ear and have a little curve, and then from this side as well, down and angle over. So a little curve for the chest, and then we're going to come down to the arms, curve up to a little wrist here, and then we'll have the little hand here. So I'm going to do an angle up and then an angle down for like the fingers, okay? So for the other side of the hand, slightly less angled so that it widens out toward the knuckles, and angle down. And then there's like a little thumbs, okay? Now I'm going to put in little lines following those same angles for the little fingers, okay? And that's how I draw human hands too. So I'm making my little mouse have kind of tiny miniature human hands. I really don't know what mouse hands look like. or I guess it's a rat. I keep calling it a mouse. I think I've done that throughout this whole video. I guess because in my brain mice are cuter, but it is a rat. Yeah. Okay, so little thumb here, and then the hand, the same thing. So I'm gonna angle out just a little bit, and then angle in. This one's almost straight, and then angled in just a little bit. Little separation, the fingers, curves on the bottom, okay? And then for the back side of the mouse, for the body, I'm gonna come up kind of imaginary line through the ear, and then that's where the back is gonna come, and then kind of widens out a little bit, and then he's got like big fluffy backside here. And then I'm gonna put the tail coming around this direction, curving around. Change the angle on the rock a little bit. He's gonna have a little foot sticking out here as well, so little toes. The same idea as the hands. And then we'll have the face, a little hairy, and coming over that ear, and there'll be some shading. And I don't want my ears to be like perfect round circles. I find it, I don't know, I like the character of having them be a little bit jaggedier. Okay, now I'm gonna lighten up the sketch here. Okay, now I can go in and paint it. I'm gonna start with a 16 round, and I'm gonna do a really pale wash of a muted pink. So this is permanent rose with a little bit of olive green plus whatever else was mixed in this well. Go over the entire mouse, leaving the eyes not painted so that I can have a nice highlight in them. And just a little bit of green for some shadows. A little bit more pink in those areas. And it's just building up some of that color in those shadow areas. Lift out just a little bit of a highlight on the top of the head and jaw where some of the shadows from the chest bled. Address this hard edge that's happening right there, little cauliflower. Okay, now I'm gonna let that dry and then come back and do the next layer. Smaller brush, so size 8 round, and I'm gonna start bringing in a little bit more of my browns. So mixing some of my pink with some of my green and getting in some darker shadows. I'm trying to negative paint a little bit of texture around face and then bring that down, that color down into the shadow. More pink onto the hand. And right now it's just a solid color. I'll add in the little shadows for the separation for the toes or fingers later. Just adding a little bit of grays in here. Pink on this headless foot. A little bit of brown texture behind the head to really set the head and ears. Dry it off and drag there some texture. Pink in there, little bit grayish brown, very, very light. Just some more texture. Lift up a highlight on the back here. Get rid of some of the color and some of the texture there. Smooth it out. I'm just gonna scrubbing and then lifting my towel. And let's go with a much brighter pink on the tail. And some green to the shadow side of the tail. Again, clean off my brush, dry it, and just touch that edge between the shadow and the highlight to blend it. I'm gonna add some shadows in to the hands for the fingers. So this gets a separation here. And same here for the toes. Okay, just a tiny bit of that color to get some shadows of some hairs here along the edges. Just to add a little bit of texture to our whole chest. Just separate the hands from the furry arm here. A little bit of that shadow also. I think that's looking pretty good. Now I'm going to come in and work on the face. Just a little bit of shadow this side here and blend that out. Okay, very subtle. And a slight shadow on the side of the nose. Blend that out as well. A little bit here. Scrunching my brush in and around to get some hairy textures toward the face and blending that out. Adding a little bit more darkness toward the middle. Same for the other ear. A bit around, a little bit pink and darkness. Get some clean water. So adding water away from the color first and just touching the color and letting it blend. I can add more in, just tapping that in and letting it bleed out. Okay, I kind of want to do a little bit of a pinkish brown around the edge of the ears, give them a little bit of definition, but I'm not going to outline the thing, just a couple little spots. pink nose, a little bit of pink around the eyes. Mouth is going to be the gray color, so a little line down, curve around, add a little bit of the inside of the mouth here in pink, and then just a tiny bit more gray to set that off some. For the eyes, I need to pick a color. Let's go with green because it contrasts with the pink, basically. That's the reason I chose green. I want to leave quite a bit of white space so that I can have a nice highlight. I'm gonna let that dry before I do the pupil. I'm gonna get a little bit of like a pinky gray color and tap that in for the little like freckles where the whiskers are gonna come out. Now I'm gonna use a dark mix of Payne's Gray and Sepia for the pupils. I'm gonna start by getting in a little arch like I did the iris, and then I'm gonna tap that color in so that I leave some nice white space for highlight. I want to add just a touch more shadow along the nose and out this edge just a little bit harder than I wanted. Now just a little bit of shadow here on the nose, the side of the face, it out a little bit. Go. Get just a tiny bit of texture into the face. Now to paint the rock, I'm going to start with getting some color around, or getting some clean water around the rat here. Now I'm going to get some grays and some browns and just tap and the bleed into where I added all of that water brown. So I'm just using Payne's Gray and Burnt Umber here essentially. Tap some of that color in. We get a little bit of ultramarine in here just because it's granulating, so it'll add a little bit more interest here. So ultramarine and burnt sienna, lifting up off of the rat, lifting up just a little bit around the rat too, so that it doesn't create like odd cauliflowers on the rat himself. A little bit of sky, so bigger brush, size 16 round, and then a little bit of cerulean blue in behind. I'm going to tone that down with a little bit of my gray mix here. Lost edges over here on the left side. The rock and the sky are in together over there. Here I'll keep some harder edges. Go back in with my smaller brush here and get some darkness closer to the rat just to get some shadows going. So now that I've put in the rock, the hands look a little too pale. That rock dries, it will get more texture, and then I'll go in and add one final layer on the rock, make sure I'm happy with my shadows and everything on the rat, and then be done. So now I'm just going to take a larger brush that's dried all the way, and I'm going to get some ultramarine and some burnt umber, maybe a little bit of burnt sienna to make it a little bit warmer. Just dry brushing here just to get some more texture. And then I want to crisp up this edge a little bit on the top, drag some of that color in toward the rest of the rock. Just a little bit more definition on the other side as well. But I still want it to be kind of a lost edge, so I'm going to add some clean water, clean-ish water, to make that bleed out. And then front edge, I want to be a little bit more defined too, and that's going to come all the way down to the bottom. Now I don't want these hard edges to be here, so I'm just going to take a minimally damp brush and kind of drag some of that wet up into the dry areas so that it doesn't create those hard edges. Kind of just a little bit more warmth in some areas, just touching in some of the burnt sienna mixed with the ultramarine and gray, but it's really warmed it up a lot by having that burnt sienna in there. It's adding a little bit of darkness with some sepia along this bottom edge. Okay, I'm gonna let that dry, and then I think I'm done. Just a little bit more dry brushing, not everywhere, just to get some more texture into the rock, because I'm using a darker gray here. Okay. Now I'm gonna take my smaller brush, same gray really, and get in those toes again on the feet just to get that separation and a little bit of that extra detail back in. And then with how dark the rock is, I think that I can go a little bit darker on the facial features and not have it look out of place. And just a little bit of a shadow on the top of the nose. That's good. Just a little bit more pink to the side of the nose as well. Okay. Add a touch more darkness to the ears in some places. Now I'm going to take my white pastel pencil and add in some whiskers and some little highlights here and there. Okay, so then I'm going to take a scalpel and just gently scratch away a little bit of finer whiskers. And there is the baby rat.
Thank you so much for watching today. I really hope you enjoyed it. And just remember that these cards are available for sale on my website if you don't feel like having a go at it yourself. Have an awesome day.